Yes, it is I, your humble host, Bill Hatch, the third, coming to you live from the palatial studios of Bald Spots Productions here in the beautiful city of Irvine, California. Almost forgot where I was. And it is another episode of Not Quite After Midnight, the mini roundtable edition. And with me tonight is a second round guest, Richard Blank from Costa Rica's call center, and of course in Costa Rica. And joining us also from a more than acceptable safe social distance is my second guest for this evening, Tony Selimi, or Tony Jetton Selimi. And this is going to be interesting because even though it's Richard's second bite at the apple, the last time it was him alone was my guest, and so this will be his first chance to see what it's like with a threefer. So, so how are you gentlemen doing this evening?
I'm doing extremely great, especially after midnight.
That's true. It is after midnight since you're in London. That's let's see, you got 8 hours on us, I think. So
Yes, we are 8
yeah.
hours ahead of you. Yes.
So Selimi, am I saying that right? Selimi?
Selimi, absolutely. In Arabic means peace.
Peace. Okay. How'd you end up in London?
Well, 32 years ago, I was in a civil war, just what's happening right now
Oh
in
goodness.
Ukraine, in former Yugoslavia. So my life was saved, and pretty much my mother put me on a one-way flight ticket to
Wow.
London.
Wow. So that's quite the adventure. Love hearing stories about people who survived the worst life has to throw at you because it tends to put things in perspective.
It does indeed, Bill. You know, when you go through the worst, and you can't expect any worse than that. And you know, when you watch and rewatch it over the years, happening in different countries, it's really heart-wrenching to observe how humanity is not really evolving to the level that we have the potential to evolve.
Indeed, indeed. And then Richard, how are things going down in Costa Rica?
As we say in Costa Rica, pura vida. And Tony, I can't extend how much grateful I am to hear that you are safe and that your family cared enough. And I know that being very young and being sent away, that must have been a very big adventure for you, but it also makes you grow up fast and it almost takes away your innocence. But obviously, you grew up into a great guy, and so it turned out okay. But yeah, hearing that from a first-person perspective, it really hits home. You are so far away. Here, I'm in Costa Rica. You're in London, but then again, we know people or care about people that are in these zones, and so I guess we all wish we could be having a very good evening, sharing laughs, but we're just very fortunate to be here with you this evening, Bill, and you, Tony, just be able to share ideas and have a really good time with the audience.
Absolutely, I'm really looking forward to it because I believe the world needs more inspiration, wisdom, and love.
That's for sure.
Absolutely.
That's for sure. So, Tony, you present yourself as an internationally award-winning life strategist and business coach, specializing in human behavior, leadership development, and maximizing business and human potential. That's quite a mouthful. I can't even say it in one breath.
You know, if my late mother was alive, you know, while I was after the war finished and struggling and working 5 different jobs to educate myself and get myself back to some form of normality and cope with all the losses and you know, everything that happened. When I started to accumulate different accolades and you know professional qualifications, my mother used to say to me, "You'll need a book to write them down." And pretty much her word became true because 30 years down the line, exactly what has happened. So you know, when I left the corporate world, my last job was in managing and delivering £9 billion technology transformation program. So pretty much I know what Richard is going on with the call centers, because, I was at the beginning when the call centers were being set up, at the times when we started to outsource technology and support services. So it's when the last financial crash happened, I had this like calling inside of me. How do I merge the scientist and the engineer and the CIO and all these business and technical skills with spirituality, with love, with healing, with mindfulness, with psychology, cognitive behavior, and all the things that I've learned over the years? And how do I merge those two worlds together? So it is in this quest to merge science and spirit that I wrote my first book, A Path to Wisdom, and I laid down the foundation for human excellence.
Awesome. Now, Richard is more than just a call center CEO. He's an interpersonal communication conflict management strategist, and more importantly, has the largest collection of American pinball machines in Central America. Now, it's not the natural beauty or the people of Costa Rica that makes me want to go down there. It's playing pinball.
I'm a strong believer in happy mediums. And when people can express themselves during play, children are in their most impressionable stages. And let's say 6, 7, 8, 9 years old. And it's really when you develop personality in conflict. And you also can get the confidence to grow and make friends too. And so these are the sort of experiences that can guide you for the rest of your life. And you forget that along the way. You get serious, you get jaded, you just get into a routine. And these games, which are usually older than they are, but not myself, Tony, and Bill, we grew up in the 80s, so we know these pinball machines. But it's fun, my friend. It gets them off the phone so they're not doing Instagram. They're not having that extra cigarette. And they're conversing. They're making friends. They're letting off steam. And it was an advantage that anybody could do. Just so happens no one does it. It keeps me young. It makes the environment fun. And I wish I wrote a book, but a lot of my stuff is spontaneous. I have to deal with a lot of people in the moment. It's a second language, and they're focusing so much in their intensity and concentration in these conversations. And so, really, for me, it's about side dishing their soft skills so they can focus on the main course, and just giving them a lot of positive reinforcement so they don't burn out, they don't quit, they don't have bad habits, they don't compromise ethics. And all they do is expand on their vocabulary, which, Tony, you're a phenomenal speaker. I love hearing, listening to you speak. And it's important to be strategic and to be diplomatic. And by having an extensive vocabulary, once again, you're not going to be misinterpreted, and you'll probably land the best sort of deliveries that you're looking to do.
Absolutely. I mean, communication and speaking and delivering something with intent and authenticity is the key in today's world, because we've lost that authenticity, we've lost integrity when it comes to leadership, when it comes to politics, and when it comes to what's happening around the world.
Okay. I also still believe that champions are built from the stadiums, the coaches, the players, and the environment. It's more nurture instead of nature. And so I will debrief people. Or how about this, Tony? A lot of the times I like individuals with no experience. I can teach them a CRM and a phone system, but we can mold them like a squire to a knight, and we can build a certain culture where they're not tainted. And these are the individuals that you can delegate and give additional responsibilities to, and the ones that will be with you for a very long time. Those are the foundation individuals. And it's all about just extending empathy and giving them their dignity. And as long as you do those sort of things and have the sort of business ethics where you can look at yourself in the mirror, I think you should be very successful.
I agree. I mean, I believe everybody is moldable with the right environment and with the right nurturing. So I believe nature and nurturing goes together. It's like one hand washes the other. Because if you don't have the right environment, no matter how much you try to nurture somebody, they go back into the environment where it can be extremely toxic for them. So that nurturing is not going to have the same effect as when you match the environment and the nurturing, so people can actually flourish. And sometimes when I actually work with people, I use a lot of metaphors. So when it comes to a certain situation, for instance, I would take, okay, let's take some beautiful flower from Hawaii. So let's take that flower now in Antarctica and let's leave it outside. Is it going to really flourish? Is it going to survive? And the answer is no. Why? Because
Hmm.
that flower is designed to flourish in that environment. So therefore, we as human beings, when we have this supportive environment, it's incredible what can happen. Because if I look at personal story and the thousands of people that I've helped, when that environment starts to change and shift, and when that environment is safe, and when that environment you have all the different possibilities for you to grow, it's naturally that with time, whether you like it or not, you get molded into the environment. And because our nature is to be chameleons, and it's part of our survival mechanism, when we create those two things, we create incredible transformation.
Tony, my friend, the challenge I have is what happens outside of the office. Can't go home with everybody. And a lot of the times it may affect their performance. They could be falling in love. They could be staying up all night fighting. Who knows what they're doing when they're not with me? But I do agree with you. We should always be looking at of improving, maybe recharging their batteries. How about
Yes,
this? Even
batteries,
calling the
absolutely.
balls and the strikes, being a straight shooter, letting somebody know that they might be out of character that day and that you've noticed when they were the champ, they had a coming of age moment. And so I guess being candid with people and really being forthright with them, that gives you mileage as well.
Yes, I mean, I think like I like to be equally firm and loving. And I think when you are authentic, equally firm and loving, where pretty much you can really help somebody get back into the true state of inner being, of being in that equilibrium. Because, if somebody comes at you with all the drama, for instance, and you sit in there and support that drama, the only thing you're going to add on is that energy of drama. But you can wake them up out of it and snap, so they can snap back into the true divinity that they know inside of them exists. And most people have forgotten what that divinity is inside. So one thing I loved about just reading things about you is that bringing that inner child, that most, especially we're talking about male adults in here, where in the corporate world and in the business world and in daily life work, they've forgotten to play. So, I love that about what you do, Richard, because for me, as part of the training that I do, I have something called, I work exclusively with CEOs and leaders. So I don't really go out there and do big trainings. I love to work with those who make a huge difference in the world. As part of those massive responsibilities, they've lost that inner child. So on the sixth day, what I usually do, I create most incredible activities and I put them in scenarios they would never put themselves in, including doing those a lot of fun elements. For some people could be like a recent lady that I worked, and she's never been in the water with her children. She had phobia of water, and I didn't discover that until she had 5 days with me. So on the sixth day, I took her into the open ocean in Mexico, and pretty much I got rid of her phobia in 1 day with a lot of dramas, with a lot of things. Americans can be very loud, but we managed to do it. And, she felt liberated. And she went like, oh my God, I've never been able to play with my children. I've never been able to go diving with my children or scuba diving. So I think that element of bringing up that inner child to play and be safe to play, because most people will feel embarrassed. All the adult and the parenting language will come before that inner adult curiosity to play and just be.
Well, let's not forget that growth comes out of discomfort. And so obviously fighting against one's own phobias would definitely be uncomfortable. And there's nowhere to go but grow.
Yes, I mean, well, there is, you can go further down or you can grow. It's a choice that some of us make because, one of the things that I find it very curious when sometimes I meet the very same people I met 32 years ago and they haven't really done much with their lives. So then,
Mm.
the question goes back into me saying, okay, well, here I am in the environment where you have the opportunity to grow, you have the opportunity to educate yourself, you have the opportunity to get as many jobs as you can to realize your dreams. Same environment, but different people. And that also goes same parenting, different children. So then, the quest for me was then maybe there is something more than just the environment and the nurturing. And that's where my sort of 30 years have been spent into understanding the science of spirit and how spirit plays role into our development and who we become.
Okay.
How about parents' guilt? Could that have anything to do with people's directions? They
You
might
mean
be
you
given
missed most of
opinions. They might
it?
have certain careers that should be expected of them. There's that sort of family tradition.
In my culture, you have to be a doctor as a male man. You know,
Okay.
and-
Okay.
okay, it's that for sure. But also the on top of that, the fantastic emotional blackmail that mothers do with their children.
And so I guess a lot of us have to make that decision to be a dreamer. Not saying I broke a lot of hearts, but I also disappointed certain individuals in regards to what my career was. There were certain expectations, but I know I just didn't have the maturity for it. I didn't have the focus for it. And I just didn't have the desire for it. And then, as you would say, you really only get one life in 100 years. You just don't want to waste it. And I'd be willing to almost die with my boots on just to try. So at least I could look at myself in the mirror.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the reality is the moment you start to value life itself, beyond oneself, you step into this inner peace that makes you in peace with all that is. And then when you start from that space to actually, do exactly what you love doing, your life really transforms. And that's for me what happened when I spent 12 weeks in meditation, trying to figure it out who I am, what I'm here to do, and why me. Because I've lost a lot of friends, a lots of families, I lost the people in the army. And, sometimes you ask this question is, how come that I survived? How come, I am on this path? How come not somebody else is? And, then you see all of those things that happening globally and you say, okay, what is my role in that bigger picture? So for me, it's always been about education. And no matter what you do, it's a form of education. And this is something that both my late parents, my mom and my dad, instilled in me from a very young age. Because to grow up in a former communist country and to grow up in Macedonia, where as an Albanian, you were treated worse than the way Black people were treated 50 years ago. So, you did not exist. You had nobody would give you an opportunity even to go to high school or to go into university or have some form of career. You were invisible and you are programmed that you will never sum up to be anything because somebody else, that position was reserved for somebody else with a different creed and different religion. And intuitively, from a very young age, I always knew this is not just. The very same
Mhm.
people who preach God made all that is. And the very same people then, impose those um, limits of who you are and who you can become, and to tell you who you cannot be. So for me, and on top of that, there was this injustice towards women and towards other minority groups. And I always believe we are all equal. Even without me learning, without me doing all this training and college and university and degrees and words and everything I've done, since I was a kid, I knew we are equal. And for me, that has been something that's been driving me through every challenge in my life. And then bring something together that to help people realize we are all one, we are all connected.
The problem comes, I think, with a lot of it when we're allowed to strip the humanity away from another, from the other, if you will, whatever that other happens whatever categories that other happens to fit into. And by stripping away that person's humanity, it allows you to treat them like that. And so what we have to do, I think, is restore the vision of the other's humanity to people, to make them realize that they are just as human as we are, as they are, as you are, as whoever is. And once that vision of humanity is restored, then you kind of have to treat someone the same that you would expect to be treated, or even better, depending on how far you want to take the creed. I know you're a leadership development coach, as am I. The model I use is I call it ethical leadership, and which probably is cheating a little bit as to increasing the value of it, but yeah, one of the first things that I try to instill in people is humility. The view that another is more important than you. Just, well, maybe not more important. That's putting it too far. But that the other is important in and of themselves, whatever stage of life they happen to be in. Any thoughts on that, gentlemen?
I just see people that don't love themselves. Because if they can't love themselves, how could they extend that sort of love towards others? And can I blame them? I don't know
Right.
them. I don't know what force march they're on. And I can't say that somebody that might dye their hair, have sort of tattoos or ornaments or piercings. I see that as self-expression. There's nothing wrong with that. But then there are people that literally just do not like themselves. And they've lost their way. And no matter what you try to do to assist them, they're convinced. And it's almost making it worse. And so maybe it's just one of those yin and yang things where the sour and the sweet, where the only way you will know if compassion is given is by someone that doesn't give the compassion. You, there's no straight lines in nature. As much as I would love the world to be 100% love, we would never know what that is unless there's 1% that doesn't love. And so I don't respect it. I try to avoid individuals like that, but I've grown up enough to be able to see individuals a certain way and either keep my distance or just find very intelligent ways to relate with them and work with them so there's no sort of conflict. But I do see that, and I see that as a shame. And these are people that just never maybe even learn to smile. How about they don't even make their bed in the morning? And it's just little things of even cleaning the dishes and ironing your clothes. These little wins of self-respect add up into the end. And then you wonder why people have their direction and they have their momentums.
Yes, I will add on to that, Richard. It's for me, it's all about everything you mentioned, but it's a learned behavior because
Mm.
in our true nature, if you really take any baby, let's say the two of us were born in China, and or let's say they adopted us in China, and let's say we're in one family, the two of us. Right now, we'll be communicating in Chinese and communicating in the values and in the tradition of whatever our, let's say, foster parents would have taught us. So this is the thing that we have, 8 billion people on the planet running different software. And this is how I pretty much, when I started really thinking what is my role in all of this. And for me, it's always been about, no matter what job I've done, I've been put in the middle of the fire. Here's the key, Tony, sort it out. So, since I was a kid, I was in this consistently given the environment for me to fix things. And I became a very good engineer in doing that kind of job and fixing things. But the penny never dropped until the age 39, how what I was doing in technology is pretty much what's going on in our minds. And until I started putting together what I've learned in university, after I left university, when I was one of the top students in my high school before the war in maths and science, how at quantum level, human behavior, you can find everything at a quantum level. And, COVID was pretty much a wake-up call for many people, for those who want to wake up, because such a microscopic, invisible thing put the entire world at its knees. It changed us forever in whatever way, sometimes for good, sometimes for worse. But similarly, one single thought, one single event, one single pain can either break you or make you. And many people who are in pain, all those things that you referred, Richard, are for sure in some form of pain. And, it took me years to heal my own pain. And the more I healed that pain, the more I was in peace with all the differences that were showing up in my life. And it took me many, many years to combine the polarity of our duality in our nature. And that's for me where you step into being in peace with thyself. And when you're peace in thyself, you're in peace with everything, including those things that may be challenging our values. And it's a great space to be. Why? Because even those people don't feel threatened by you.
Mm-hmm.
They feel accepted because there's no judgment from your biased thinking and a specific hierarchy of values and expecting somebody else to live according to your specific hierarchy of values, which is almost like a fingerprint for every human being. And when I started really going through centuries of understanding values and understanding how that really affects our behavior, it changed me in the way I communicate and dissolve conflict. Because for me, conflict comes when two people have differences in the way they value things, and they don't know how to link those values that they can have a great communication with each other.
No, I'm writing down tons of notes because
I don't have a pen.
ideas are flying through my head faster than I can memorize them. Yeah, there's the golden rule. If we can get biblical for a second, do unto others as you would have them do to you. I was thinking that could change that a little bit to love others as you would have others love you. And then it occurred to me you could also say value others as you would have others value you. But we still run into the issue of what value is, what is valuable. The culture, the Chinese culture may value certain things more than the English culture, more than the Costa Rican culture. And all, and so there we have a bit of a conflict. Although we think of love as universal, perhaps it's not exactly. It is, but it isn't.
Well, I mean, yes, you are partially right and partially no. meaning, I mean, if we look at love as light, let's look at a metaphor in here. And if we look at anything that we don't like as darkness,
Okay.
if we look, those two things, light and darkness, coexist in the universe. And they beautifully coexist in the universe. The problem comes that we have been taught one way of thinking. We have been taught that one way of value. We have been taught one way of love. And if you put people, and I've done this in like huge rooms with like 1,000 people at the place where I spoke, and I asked them to write down exactly what love is. None of them put the same thing. None of them. Some of them, they didn't even realize what they were saying. And for me personally, it's that synthesis of all polar opposites that gives you that glimpse of love. And we all have the capability to love from that space of inner equanimity, where the mind is fully balanced, where your biases and perceptual biases and cognitive biases don't interfere with that pure energy. Now, is it a hard work? Yes, it is. Has anyone reached enlightenment in the world? Absolutely not. We are all on a journey. Even the Dalai Lama, even all these people we admire and we fantasize about. Why? Because we are just like nature, consistently destroying and evolving, destroying and building. And as humanity, we will destroy anything that does not serve us, and then we start building something new that takes us to the next stages of our evolution. Now, if we go through morals and ethics and values, there's a whole dialogue I can give you guys from 20,000 years I've been studying, but all of those evolve. The key link that one of the reasons I wrote the Unfakeable Code, 2 books I wrote during the COVID, is precisely that what you asked earlier on, Bill, around all of those different values. And the problem is not the value. The problem is people have not been taught how to align those differences so 2 people can actually have a great communication and great experience by honoring each other's values and how your high value serves my low value and how my low value serves your high value. To give you an example, with a client specifically, I can mention a case. So I have a client who had a like 100 million court case, okay? And nobody would give in. Everybody was with their ego, I'm right, I'm right, I'm right. So I put them down and I took them to the exercises that I've created. And at the end, they hugged each other and thanked each other. And they settled out of court. Because when the mind starts to be equilibrated and all of those perceptual filters that we create and biases that we create, the more polarized we become, the higher the conflict. The more at the center, meaning whatever I judge you, it's in me, and whatever it's in me, it's in you. The moment the mind realizes that, and the mind is, when you go through the different experiences and being able to see in perfect equilibrium that whatever happened to you had its upside and its downside. It had its good part and bad part. That's the moment where true love experiences between 2 people. Because you become one. And when you are one, believe me, there's no room for fighting or conflict. There's only room for thank you, I love you, thank you.
I can see that. For some reason, it made me think of Adam Smith and maximizing economic value. The old argument about socks versus airplanes. We put it, here in the U.S. we make pretty darn good airplanes, but just about anybody can make pretty darn good socks. And so, if we give the sock making to another country that doesn't make really good airplanes, then we maximize our own our own time as it relates to economic endeavor. And I'm thinking that holds true for just about anything, that if we as individuals have a high value of something, as an individual, have a place a high value on something and a low value on something, on something else, then we need to match with someone else's high and low values, so that what we value a lot, we can take from the other, and what we value little, but they value much, then we can trade. And thus serve each other in ways that are mutually beneficial, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely, it makes sense. Meaning, for instance, if I think about low value in my life, my high value, I teach, I coach, I consult, I speak, I train, I do filmmaking, and I love cooking, and I love outdoor activities. Anything else, I delegate. But the people who I delegate, for them, it's a high value, the tasks that I delegate, which means they don't need motivation for them to do it. They are inspired to do it. And unfortunately, most people don't know how to match this. This is a problem in companies. When I go in companies and I look at productivity and performance levels, the one thing that is for sure clear from the beginning, they have no clear vision of the values that the company has and how the company values needs to be aligned with the employee values. And this is something that I've been doing with a lot of the different business owners. Why? Because, for you to try to motivate your team, it takes a lot of time, a lot of energy that can be used for something else. That could be your family time, that could be your fun time, playing time, whatever you want to create. But when you have inspired employees, when you take the employees through this process, it's incredible what I've seen with various companies for the last 12 years that I work, and I've done this. But actually, I did this even when I was working in technology without even knowing. I was experimenting back then, see whether really all of those people, Socrates and all these powerful people through history, actually were right or wrong. Something that the scientists in me always like to push boundaries and say, okay, how is this applying? But in our human nature, if you take a mother, for instance, and her mother just had a baby child, and you are an entrepreneur, and I've seen this in some of my clients when I help them resolve and dissolve the conflict in a relationship. And there's a documentary about it in Amazon called Living My Illusion. The truth hurts. And when you get a mother, her highest value is to look after the child. In some cases with parents, it could be the father. The mother could be the main income earner. So therefore, if you go, let's say you are an entrepreneur who sells cars, and you go to a shopping center, and the mother, all she sees is everything that she can buy for the baby. But the father, all he sees is how he can sell more cars. So when the mother says, "So let's go to the baby shop," the father is totally demotivated. And therefore, they end up having arguments about it and whatever it might be. But when I said to the father, say, how about when you go to the babies, all these fathers, all these mothers, they might need a bigger car. They might need an upgrade to the car. They might need to sell them something. And you start dialogue with them and start creating customer. And you're like, okay, I never thought about that. Suddenly, what was low priority for him became high priority to match his wives. And both of them enjoyed the experience. That is exactly when you learn how to match each other's values, you have a beautiful relationship, not just with yourself, with your partner, with your family, with your children, at work, and everybody you meet. You just need to learn to listen better of what the value of the other person is.
Yeah, Richard, I'm thinking that you could speak to this kind of a thing on an international level, since you are definitely a third culture, being a third culture kid right now. But what did you find when you went to Costa Rica, and as far as value differences and the potential for culture clash?
Well, I once again was able to acclimate myself well because I spoke the language. And secondly, I knew that I was a guest in this country. So instead of being a loud foreigner with expectations, I was not on a home court advantage. So you really have to learn what to do in a country to be able to, and also have a lot of patience. But this is a very old school, sort of traditional family and religious sort of environment that we have. And I like it. I like the multi generational families where people live with their parents and grandparents. And you see people passing down wisdom and tradition through generation. Naturally, every new generation has their quirks. I mean, today, the kids like to work virtual. So it's a little bit different from the brick and mortar that I was used to in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even the early 2000s. A lot of people like to have a relationship, but more virtual, or they'd rather do things chat or email versus a phone call. And a lot of the times people will pass on going out for drinks and would just rather hang out and play games online or do something like that. So a clashing, no, I just see more of it an evolving. And if you grew up with it, you're used to it. Unlike myself that grew up differently and see the changes. But um, to me, I really like to do a lot of listening. And here it was a great chance to learn a lot of the local expressions, the traditions, and the bad words so you can kind of fit in, but also to do my special sauce because they were always intrigued. Who is this Northeast Philadelphia individual that learned a language, came here and started a center? So they were kicking tires and poking and seeing what was happening. And I wanted to be authentic. And so I can make a joke. I know how to break bread, mentioning the games earlier, walking rows and contributing when it was necessary and not being overbearing and not being someone that intimidates them. By having this sort of leverage and being a CEO of a company, I could wield my sword and I could break someone and give them a walk of shame. I decided not to do that. And so it confused them. A lot of the times, Tony, I'd be the first boss that ever knew their name, and I thought that was a shame. I thought that was terrible. And unfortunately, my two friends, I might be the last boss that ever knows their name as well. Because people, as you were mentioning earlier, don't take the time. And it's very simple. I mean, these are the things I learned pre-internet and pre-cell phone and computers. It was just the way that I was raised. Besides your pleases and thank yous, having courtesy, showing that sort of extended gracious behavior, which could make people feel very comfortable with you. And here's the best part, it's authentic. Instead of trying to put up a front, you got to juggle it and you're going to get caught because it's like telling a lie. But if it's the truth and it's really who you are sincerely and it's valid, you could tell the same thing and act the same way over and over again. And that's where you get your reputation because you're consistent and you're somebody that's not just doing a lot of fluff and smoke and mirrors because you're really only as good as your reputation. And secondly, how do you want to look at yourself in the mirror? Do you want to be seen as someone that's a charlatan or someone that's a deceiver or somebody that is humble, can put yourself in vulnerable positions to ask clarification questions? So there is no conflict. So there's no clashing. Maybe I didn't understand or before preventions are better than cures. So instead of assuming and taking something, I might ask permission first or ask what to do. And so it's just careful steps. It's almost like Indiana Jones in the cave. I'll get the gold, but you got to take your time. And there's booby traps every now and again, and there's zigs and there's zags. And 10% of the time, there's a inconsistent variable that you don't even know about that's going to be thrown out there that you got to adjust yourself with. And so to me, it was really just about being respectful and smiling and listening and confirming and repeating and making sure I'm showing active listening. And by doing these things, I really haven't had any clashes. All I've had was a lot of wind in my sails and a ton of momentum. And so I think that would make it easier for anybody going into any sort of culture.
Absolutely agree on that. You mentioned humility, and I think it does come back. A lot of it does come back to being humble, but without losing yourself or your authenticity. Um,
Sure.
definitely being bold and brave enough to put yourself into a vulnerable position, and I think people generally appreciate that.
Some do, of course.
Some take advantage of
And, and,
that.
and some and some expect you to
Mhm.
know. And I don't know what you
Right.
know. And a lot of the times I'll say I'm a guest here, and they say you can't use that anymore. You've been here for 2 decades, but it's the truth. Things that might come natural to you are foreign to me, and I might not just be used to it, but it doesn't mean I don't like it or respect it. I'm just my intuition's not kicking in, it's just something that's not spontaneous. And so you have to be patient with yourself and not be very hard on yourself. And it's just one of those things that I guess can liberate somebody's mind and to being more open-minded. and to filling it with that sort of stuff.
Patience. Wrote that down. Patience. It
It's a
is
virtue.
indeed. Oh goodness. Yeah. Well, the awkward
I will
pause.
add something, though, if
Yes,
I
please.
may, in regards to clashing. If there's no sense of urgency, I always like to sleep on things, or I like to write a
Mm.
draft and maybe not send it. Because if you're given the luxury of time, you could save a marriage, a best friend, an account, a Thanksgiving dinner if you can reconvene the following day. Dust is settled, you've taken a walk, you maybe worked out, you slept on it. And if someone extends to you that sort of courtesy, I've seen it really make things better because there's heated moments and you're mentioning you might even be out of character, you're just not thinking right, or just in a bad mood that day. And so depending on the relationship, depending on certain target dates and time frames, I usually like to give somebody not a second chance, but a second wind or a second meeting just to see if we're consistent as we were in the first meeting. And even though I'm supposed to close you on the first call, a lot of the times you really secure it on the second time around because you get a chance to send your credentials, show good faith, answer certain things, and let them think about that first impression that you gave, which should be lasting.
A lot of the things you shared, Richard, I'm going through my memory lane. And one of the things that, growing up in a large family, I had to remember names, whether you like it or not. So from a very young age, I learned to remember names, and I created my own like ways of remembering names or things that I need to remember in my memory. So I was hired to do this like massive project, and I had to work with 20 project managers. And in the first meeting, by the end of the meeting, I remembered all their names. Now, they afterwards revealed to me that they didn't like me being the program manager because a lot of people working in the government, they thought they're going to be selected. And they said, one thing that straight away you broke down all of our barriers. By the end of the meeting, you remembered every person's name in that room, and that impressed us all.
Awesome.
So it is something I think a lot of people forget how powerful that is, because name is very unique to that individual. And it's something that, sometimes people want to earn the respect of knowing somebody's name. And when you actually show that kind of respect that, you just spent an hour with these people, or 2 hours, or 3 hours, or 4 hours, and then, thank you very much, Richard. Thank you, Bill. It leaves that impression in their heart and in their mind. As you said, it might not be that closure in the first call, but if you made that impression from the beginning, that person remembers you. And then the other lesson which I wanted to share with you, as you were talking, it's I was working with one of the top healers of our times, a guy called Martin Brockman. And back then, it's pretty much I was healing all of those wounds from the war, what happened to me, everything else. So while I was going through building a career in technology, I spent a lot of time and energy and money in doing a lot of courses and training with anybody, everybody. But I always had spiritual teachers and healers as part of that journey. And I remember flying to Nice, and I did not sleep all night. This was like I finished work on Friday, straight to the plane, straight to Nice. Then I had to rent a car, then drive for another 2 hours. So I arrived at the place around 3 a.m. And then it's supposed to start in the morning, like 7 a.m. So of course I was tired. I show up around 7:05. And the teacher said to me, after me paying a lot of money, by the way, and going through all of that, he said, "You're disqualified. You're not going to be in this training. You aren't on time." So I went back into my room, raging like 20, I think 26, 27, raging with anger and saying to myself, this guy doesn't respect me. Everything that goes into your head after having all of this, spending all of that money, going through all of that effort. And I wanted to really say the worst things to this guy. And I said, "You're no kind of teacher." And actually, I sat down and I wrote it down what I wanted to say to him. And guess what? I fell asleep. So I never sent the email because I was ready to go back to London. I literally didn't want to be anymore in that place, in that space. I said, I don't want to be there to work with a teacher who hasn't even thought about what I had to go through to be here. So here I am, full asleep, totally like stuff. And 5 a.m. next day, somebody knocks at the door, and it was him. And we're like, "Are you ready?" But guess what? I never sent the email. That was the moment when I learned what you just shared, Richard. So if something that presses all of my buttons and builds all of this fire inside of me, step back, either meditate, either write it down in a letter somewhere or in my notebook, and then reflect. And maybe after 24 hours, 48 hours, I'll come back to you. And guess what? 99.9% of the cases I never did. So it's
Amazing,
great.
isn't it?
Yes.
And got you out of trouble too.
Yeah.
More than once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well done, Tony.
Yeah.
But those are things I think a lot of people could benefit from, because, life will always bring us into those situations, whether we like it or not. As you said, to get into that Indiana Jones and into that pot of gold, you have to go through a lot of the challenges on the way. But it's great representations for life, basically. It's a great metaphor. And in one of my books, I share it is who you show up in those difficult moments that defines who you are in that moment in time.
Character during chaos. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yes, character during chaos. And when you have that kind of character, stable character, it's incredible the opportunities that show up after that chaos. Incredible. I've experienced it for the last 20 years. And for me, I observe in silence. Sometimes you have people, they're not open to have a discussion like the three of us we have tonight. So therefore, I just remain silent. I become very dumb. I know nothing. And I just sit down in there, listen, and, I get on by my own business, whatever. But it is who you show up as when the war rages inside of you that defines who you are.
Well, not just character in chaos, but character in opportunity. When the opportunity arises to go counter to your normal character and perhaps make a quick gain for yourself, but still keeping that character in spite of the opportunity to benefit yourself, and yeah, in spite of
There's no greater benefit that when the war rages, you become peaceful. That's the first and foremost, the greatest benefit every human being could benefit from. Being able to silence your being when the war inside of you rages. Because it's not those battles that we fight on the outside, it's those that we fight within ourselves that defines who we become.
Very good.
It's also, you see your priorities if you're about to lose everything. It's like if your house is burning, what's the one thing you run in and grab? Is it your photographs, your dog?
Yes.
I don't know. But you realize you could lose everything if I could just keep one thing. And I don't know, it grounds you. During COVID, there were a lot of individuals that I had extremely high expectations on, and they disappointed me so. And then you had other individuals that really stepped up the plate, showed leadership, didn't surprise me. I always knew they had it in them, but really added to our, I guess, reinforcement that we needed at that time. So not everybody gave up, and it kind of, turned things around. And so to me, it almost shattered my innocence in regards to owning a company, because this was my first company and we were doing so well, and then all of a sudden COVID, which was outside of my control, happened. And the way that you were mentioning loyalty to a place and standing tall, people were concerned about their families, their health, what was going on. So as much as I was going to stay with the ship, there were people that were jumping ship. And that's not just at my company, at every company. They were just going home and they were scared. And what do you do? Do you tell somebody to compromise something for you, or do you put yourself in their shoes, knowing that it would affect you, and let them go? And so these are the sort of things that I had to come to grips with and during this. And so I guess at this stage now, those that stayed with me and that, yeah, as I mentioned, stepped up to the plate naturally, not only have they been rewarded, but it was that other stage of my life, which I've never experienced that before, but I did. And so I have a new found appreciation and admiration towards these individuals. You might say I'm their boss and I pay them and work with them, but the way that I look at them, it's, as you were mentioning, on such an equal level
Yes.
that I almost want to hug them, but I know that I can't because of labor laws. But I do everything I can to shower my praise and just to let them know that they're very much appreciated.
There's nothing more beautiful, Richard, when you love somebody. And that also extends to people you work, people who work for you. And I always believe that when you open your heart to anybody, especially to those who work with you, their heart will be open right back at you. And I had the pleasure because throughout COVID, I continued working because a lot of people had to adjust them to all sorts of stuff. And one thing that helped me, because part of my work as working in technology, I always was in charge of disaster recovery plans. And, I built that kind of mentality in my head always to have that. But actually, it didn't happen in UK. In fact, growing up in communist country, one of the ideologies is like you work you work for peace but prepare for war. And disaster
Hmm.
recovery, majority of the companies in the world, they put it at the bottom of their agenda. And also when it comes to budgets, when it comes to actually investing the money for anything to happen. And most companies didn't have the cash in the bank to be able to support such a long-term closure. And some of the businesses that I worked, I mean, I frankly wanted these people to be my bosses. If I ever were to go back and let's say I was working for somebody, I wanted these people to be my bosses. They actually not only maintained the staff throughout COVID, but also innovated, adapted, and made sure that those people and their families were growing. One thing I want to share very openly, who tremendously impressed, it's a lady who's on the board of the Caribbean Tourist Board. And it's one of the hotels where I went there with a VIP client that I did my training, but also I got engaged with my partner because of her kindness and love and her husband. It's Jade in Santa Lucia, St. Lucia. So if you haven't been in there, I highly recommend it. It's one of the best hotels. I will always say to people, take somebody you love in there. Or if you have a client, take your client in there because they will love you back.
Hmm.
And she pretty much, the entire concept of the hotel, it's eco-friendly 5, 6, 7-star luxury. And everybody in the hotel, it's local people. All the food is being produced in the farm, local farm. And even the Michelin star chef is local, who they flew in experts to train their staff in there. So she made sure the community in St. Lucia is being supported throughout COVID. Guess what? Those people have been working with her from the beginning of opening the hotel, which is something that I haven't shared, but my parents were restaurateurs. It reminded me that I'm in the presence of my mom and dad, although they are in spirit somewhere, because they treated like that every single member who worked for our restaurants. So mom and dad treated everybody as their children. And it's a lost art in the corporate world to be able to be a leader who sees the company as a family and therefore have those high value when it comes to the human capital you have and treat them with equality, with just, but also when things go sour, what kind
Hmm.
of things you can do to grow and support. And of course, you can't force anybody to be with you through those dark moments, but those who remain are those who really matter. And this is what you shared earlier on, that there were people who left and there are people who remained with you. And then you were called to naturally reward those people. And I believe there's this part of us globally that we have this more of an optimistic view of the world, and therefore can guide and nurture those who actually want to be in that part. But also, I also believe that we will never have those things in total peace around the world. Why? Because, the duality of our nature. So therefore, those sides will always coexist. The question is, how do you become masterful in those two sides and therefore show your love and wisdom through all of those challenges so more people can benefit and can grow in the process of you growing and you shining?
Well, I think where was I going? Uh, no, um, there is,
You have a
yes,
powerhouse.
I do. I've just it's gotten on the tip of my tongue and I can't force it out. But there is well, basically, it seems to me that pretty much everybody, at least everybody I've ever met or heard of or known, could be said to be selfish, self-centered. They see the value of things to themselves, whatever that best value happens to be. Um, and I think how we get to the next step is to get people to understand that the good of others is the good of self. The making the switch from egoism to enlightened egoism is the step to take. That yeah, that it's not all about me. It might be all about me to me, but so long as I only look at myself, so long as I'm only focused inside of me, that my life is limited at the best, and at worst, it is bad because focusing outside of oneself gets the old rising tide lifts all boats, and that if I help others, those others, the effect on the others will help me in the end. And I think for most people, whether they think of themselves as selfish or not, need to learn that lesson. Is that a cricket?
I mean, you have to expect people to have self perseverance. The people need to really think about themselves
Right.
first, their own health. They're not good to anybody else if they're not in their best shape mentally and
Mhm.
physically. But no, it's about your options, about people's parameters and their limits. Someone could say they're selfish because they take the last piece of pizza. But man, they helped you move your sofa in your house. Give it to them, so I mean, there's certain trade-offs. Maybe you don't know the whole story behind someone's
Mhm.
decision and what built up to that
Well,
decision. Maybe it's a tit for a tat. Maybe your people are keeping score, or possibly the three of us have decided that if it's your destiny, you are selfish and you take it and you take
well,
that
you had
chance.
mentioned about walking in another's shoes earlier, um, and I think what really leads to understanding isn't just walking in another's circumstances, but considering the path that they've been on to get to those circumstances must be put into the mix.
It's true, but sometimes people make bad decisions as
Yes.
well. So you can't blame me for your
No.
bad decision. Your lack of preparation shouldn't be my emergency. And you're mentioning mistakes are made to learn from, and that's great too. But if it took you 2 more hours to get to my house, once again, that's on you. And so people need to be accountable to their
Yes.
decisions. And there's sometimes not shortcuts. And the best decisions usually are the toughest decisions. Waking up early, going to bed early, staying
At
late
3
to do your
in the
job to make
morning,
sure it
having
gets
this
finished.
chat.
What was that,
Uh-huh.
Tony?
100% correct.
I said at 3 o'clock in the morning having this chat. It's a decision.
Tony, I was giving you the plug on that one. I mean, what you're doing is amazing. Of course. You really are after midnight, and I love it. But
It, I think
it's
it's
good
four
stuff.
o'clock here, you know.
Yeah, thereabouts.
Oh, rock on.
But yes, I mean, I couldn't agree more. It's like, you know, again, it's like most people don't have that accountability with themselves. Meaning, you know, sometimes when I deal with people in difficult situations, and when they have this extreme polarized way of analyzing things, and when they point the finger of blame, I always do this, you know,
Mhm.
three back, one towards the person, one towards God, and take them through that process and until they have this self-reflective awareness within the self. Because when I say to them, okay, let's for argument's sake, we remove you from the air, you don't exist anymore, will the problem exist? And if you're dead, will the problem exist? And if you didn't put this yourself in that situation, will the problem exist? And you know, by the time you ask 10 quality questions in there, their brain starts reshuffling to the point where they have to take 100% ownership of their choices and decisions.
Absolutely.
And you know, it's it's a shift that happens in the people with quality questions to be able to have that self-reflective awareness and awaken that in them. So with themselves, they have this honest conversation and saying, okay, yes, I made that choice. Yes, I made that decision. And then the consequences of every choice, of every decision. And you know, there's nothing more beautiful when you tell yourself, I'm 100% responsible of my life. And that is something that shifts the power from thinking that everybody around you controls your choices and decisions to you going inwardly and saying, okay, this is what's in alignment with what I value and with what I need to do daily to get where I want to go. And yes, that means also being selfish. And there's no human being who's not selfish. And when it comes to the ego, you know, if you met me 20 years ago, I would have a very different dialogue with both of you in here about the ego and having this extremely polarized way of thinking about how bad is the ego. But, you know, again, when I talk to a group of people and you have people from all backgrounds, and therefore, again, I go back to metaphors and I draw a tree. And then I ask people, where is the ego in the tree? And 100% none of them would actually tell me. They will give me all the different things. And then I share them. And I said to them, how about if you imagine that the ego is the trunk of the tree and your heart is the branches and the fruit? So I said, can your love exist without your ego then? Can the tree, the fruits, be there without the trunk, bringing all those nutrients from the ground through the trunk into fruition? So ego is the essential part of you growing into the fruits you want to bring into the world. And if you just change that perception from having this very negative relationship with thyself, meaning people telling you you're selfish, you're this, you're that, you will always have 50% of the planet agreeing with you and 50% disagreeing with you. And this is the problem where people are not in peace with that. They're not in peace that they want the 100%, but they don't realize that the 100% is the 50 and the 50. But they want it 100% one-sided, which is delusional.
Yeah,
So, you know,
it's not. Oh, sorry.
it's totally the expectations people have.
Yeah, it's not love your neighbor as your neighbor. It's love your neighbor as yourself. You have to have love for self before you can love your neighbor, before you can love anyone.
Yes, I mean, you know, it's every human being has the traits that we either like or dislike. Every human being, including ourselves. And one of the processes that I share through all the work that I do, it's how to own those. When you come across somebody else who they have a trait that you judge, it's pretty much that part of you that is in darkness. That it's an opportunity for you to eliminate yourself and illuminate those perceptions and part of the mind where still is asleep or in darkness.
Okay. Definitely.
Are you with us? Are you with us?
I'm with us. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Tony's just throwing mic drops left and right. I love it.
yep,
No,
yep.
you came very well prepared, my friend. My main question is there a final exam? I'm only kidding. Because this is just good stuff. But it's deep. It's nice that you're mentioning it, and if anyone's intelligent besides Bill taking notes, which I'm very impressed with, they should be rewinding this and listening to it multiple times because it'll probably take the third time, Tony, for it to really sink in. You got their attention, you got them to find it, and then by that third time they listen to it is when it really connects and they put the notes in the margin. And so there's only so much time to discuss this. Obviously, you've been doing this for over 30 years and you're condensing all of this experience into these conversations. But no, you made it crystal clear. It's just, you're talking about changing someone's life and their way of looking at things. And it's easier said than done. It's not like cold turkey smoking or someone that decides to start running the next day and buying sneakers. It's, I almost think it's more of the id. I know you're talking about your ego and your persona, but I still think it's coming. It's almost like you were talking about love earlier. Sometimes I think about falling in love. I believe in metaphysics. I believe in certain sort of things we can't explain and can't control. And so a lot of this stuff I believe is just your intuition, your tingles, your sixth sense that kicks in. And so I like to put a little bit of magic dust on some of these thoughts to see if there's any sort of things out there that are assisting me and getting me there, like stars being aligned in a sense.
I believe totally in that, Richard. It's it's that intuition, that very strong intuition that I had since I was a child. What I haven't shared, it's like I was in hospital for almost like 2 years in a life support machine at the age of 8. But when I was born, my parents were told by the spiritual teacher that they used to go, saying he's going to be a master healer, he'll go around the world and do all the work that I'm doing now. But for me, it was a hoo-ha thing. But one thing I always love to learn, it's understanding science and spirit. But when I was in hospital, this is the first time I had out-of-body experiences. And back then, the only people I could talk to was my grandfather and those spiritual teachers who my parents used to go to. So, but fast forward almost 20 years down the line, I met somebody who founded a school of out of body experiences on a beach in Spain while I was there doing healing work with a client. And he observed me what I was doing and waited until everybody disappeared. And he approached me and he said, "Oh my God, so you've been doing out of body experiences for a long time." And I looked at him and I haven't heard that since I was with my grandfather, which then led me to go to a place called Academy of Conscious Evolution, and where they teach consciously out of body experiences. And then led me to so many different teachers around the world, to meeting Louise Hay, Barbara Brennan, Martin Brockman, all sorts of stuff, amazing healers. But really, one thing that I saw, the more work I was doing, the more clients I was helping, I had this like awakening that a lot of people in pursuit of the material world and material wealth, they have this very poor spiritual knowledge. And then I saw a lot of incredible spiritual people with a lot of knowledge, but extremely materially poor. And what I realized is like true spiritual teachers know how to turn spiritual wealth into material wealth. And vice versa, true material wealth teachers know how to turn material wealth into spiritual wealth. And the thing that came up last year as I finished Path to Excellence, it's what am I really doing? Asking all those questions, everything that I've done in business and over the last 20 years, what am I really doing for people? And what came up to me, it's pretty much something that I now created a new brand, a new program called Into Your Divinity. And no matter how your mind might want to be scientific, your being is spiritual. And no matter how spiritual your being it is, your body is material. And this is what causes the biggest conflict in people, the lack of awareness how to harmonize those two worlds in themselves. So that magic that you're talking about is the last principle in Path to Wisdom that I put together, miracle creation, how to consciously create miracles. And, a lot of people talk about, let's say, The Secret. When I read The Secret, I put it in a note in a book. I want to meet those teachers. I want to be of service to them. Guess what? I met all of them. I'm, to some of them, I'm in service to them. So, and then when I read James Redfield about synchronicity, this was all after the war when I was living homeless, having all those books, access to all those books and consistently reading. And I went like, oh my God, all of those things, they have so much power, but not most people pay attention to it. You can meet the most incredible person on the bus, but you never pay attention. You could meet, the love of your life somewhere, but all of that noise, all of those troubles inside of you prevent you from seeing what's there in front of you. So that magic for me is for sure having those fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth senses and incorporating that into your daily life so you can actually be the best you can be.
Definitely got to find all the ways that we can be the best that we can be. Sometimes the best we can hope for, though, is to be the best in one area that we can be. Because there's a lot of areas to be best in. And was it Benjamin Franklin said something to the effect that he was trying to improve and become perfect in all areas of his life, but he found the closer he became to perfection, the less humble he became. So he found he could never be perfect, so he gave up on the project.
Well, I don't know. If he had me as his spiritual teacher, I think he will have changed his mind. That I guarantee. Because one of the things I don't believe is that you cannot grow in all of those areas. I believe that every human being is designed to grow.
Yes.
And that means empowering your spiritual self, empowering your mind, empowering your emotional body, empowering your physical body, empowering yourself in career, in business, and in your finances, and also then socially, and the kind of greater good you can do. Because if you are disempowered in any of those areas, I can guarantee you'll never rest and you'll never sleep properly, and you'll end up being ill. So let's say you're a great executive working, but you come home into arguments, into having a wife who cheats or partner who cheats on you, children who take drugs. Are you going to be at peace? No. Let's say, you have a great relationship, but you don't have money. You can't pay the bills. You can't do anything. And the stress comes in. That relationship gets destroyed. Let's say you don't have any social life. Okay. You're going to be a lonely person that nobody knows anything about you. And therefore you'll be secluded from that. And you have all sorts of things that happens to people who become socially, inept, and you have drugs and you have all the problems. I truly believe we are designed to empower all of our areas. The fact that some people think that they can't, that's a whole different argument we can have in here. But we are designed to grow, and that means anything about us, including every critical area. So if Benjamin Franklin was living today and I was his coach, he would not have said that.
Okay. No, I've always liked the imagining the areas of one's life as wedges in a wheel, so that if there's an area that's deficient,
Broken,
then it's like having a flat tire. And
yes,
and of course, it's really hard to get anywhere with a flat tire.
absolutely correct, Bill. That's why I said to you, it's sort of this ideology. And sometimes I think 20 years ago, they put that into our head. But in today's world, especially in today's world, technology enables us to be able to have multiple skills. If you stay at home and say, the only thing I do is I bring money, no matter what partner you have, eventually you're going to lose that partner. So if you're not going to be arrogant, you're not going to wash the dishes. You say, I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to iron. I don't know how to wash myself, or I don't know how to order something online. No person in today's world will tolerate something like that. So I believe, all of us, we have multiple skills. Some of us, we spend a lot of time to actually empower and grow those areas. Because for me, perfection is something that, it's very a term that is overused. For me, it's all about growth and evolution. And I see perfection in imperfection, and I see imperfection in perfection. So for me, it's that harmony about those worlds. But we are designed to consistently grow. And it is this problem that people don't give themselves permission to grow. And it is this suppressed anger of the true nature of the human being that creates all of the problems. Because if you give yourself permission to do that, as I said, nowadays we have technology. Just go on YouTube, just go on TED Talks. If you listen for a whole year TED Talks, your entire life will change. If we read books whole year, one thing I see with all of my wealthy clients, they every single day read something, that habit that was instilled with me since I was a kid. And especially in communist countries. I'm not sure if Puerto Rico is communist like Cuba.
Costa Rica,
Richard?
not Puerto Rico.
Costa Rica, is it communist country or?
No, democratic society.
Democratic. Okay. So back then, we had to read a lot. And for me, reading really creates this magical mind and helps you, no matter the challenge, you'll find a way to rise up. And unfortunately, majority of the people today do not read. And staying on social media, that's not reading. It's not you picking up a physical book and going page by page and absorb the knowledge of an individual who's gone through the process that all of us go, but maybe they've gone to a process where you can benefit from. I don't expect every adult to go through civil war, but everything I've learned through that, they can apply all of those lessons and learning for them to transform and change their life. And in changing their life, they change everybody's life. And going back earlier on about being egoistical and self-serving, yes, even on the plane tells you put the mask first on yourself. So when you're really in peace with those traits of yourself that other people judge, when they are at peace with themselves about the traits that other people judge, we create a better communication, a better environment, and we grow better through evolution. And evolution has cycles, and no one can escape those cycles of life. No one, absolutely no one. Every 10 years, your entire body regenerates. And one of the things that helped me specifically, I was brought up to think that beliefs and values don't change. And you hold on to them to something like it's for life. No, they actually evolve. The more you overcome something, the more you transcend something, the more experience you have, the more knowledge you have, the more your values will evolve. So, if we take that hierarchy, Maslow hierarchy, and we look at through every level, there'll be unique hierarchy of their values and unique experiences and choices and decisions people make according to the level of wisdom they've collected inside themselves.
So in a sense, becoming a new person, remade. Yeah. The old true Argos paradox. If you keep replacing the planks of wood of the Argos of the ship, eventually you'll have replaced all the wood. Is it still the true ship? Is it still the Argos?
It still takes you from point to point.
It still does. So if you change everything about you, are you still you?
Well, define you.
I think that's something that needs to be a little fluid.
Yes, it's life is fluid, So if we really listen to life and what life is teaching us and everything outside of ourselves, it's a lot of wisdom out there what nature teaches us. For instance, a lot of people create, because of what's going on in their psychology, in their lives, they create those bipolar states. And, America has huge issues with bipolar states, ADHD, depression, anxiety, children taking drugs. It's like I've never seen so much adverse when I come to US about pharmaceutical companies pushing all those drugs to every person on every age. And the solution is the mind. Upgrade your psychology.
Become different. No, I like it. All right. Well, we've been at this for almost 90 minutes now. And I know, I'm sure, Tony, I'm sure you wouldn't mind getting a quick nap in before the day really starts. So unless there's something else you fine gentlemen want to say to the nice people, perhaps we should call it a night.
Are you bored of us already?
No, it's just that I keep having these awkward pauses, and I don't want to be awkward. No, is there anything else you guys want to talk about?
I just think this was a great conversation, very eclectic.
It has been.
We all are on the same page, but each one of us contributed. And so I think what you were noticing, my friend Bill, is that we're being exceptionally polite towards one another. And as we learned in kindergarten, on the yellow rug was turn taking. And so I think we were just allowing each other that luxury of jumping in when you want to and stopping. But no, I mean, 90 minutes speaks for itself, my friend. Proof is in the pudding. You don't go 90 minutes. You don't go 90
Yep,
if you don't have something. So I think the three of us did very, very well.
I think so. Yeah, we should.
I agree.
We should do this
I agree.
again sometime.
Absolutely, it'll be a pleasure. And by all means, Bill, choose a topic to challenge us. We take on challenges, no problem.
Oh goodness! I had thought for a moment there near the beginning that we were going to talk about the issues in L.A. In Los Angeles, because that seems to have gone round the world. What with racism still actually being a thing. We did kind of address the subject a little bit by talking about how we might value others, and at least at the level we value ourselves, and restoring humanity to those to whom it has been taken, from whom it has been taken, rather. So I think we addressed the subject without addressing the topic. But yeah, I think we had quite a bit of good stuff. I may have to go back and watch this a couple of times myself, in spite of taking notes.
I think both me and Richard will watch it as well.
Yay! More views.
Now, this was a lot of fun. Tony, it was a pleasure meeting you. Bill, I can't thank you enough for having me back on your show.
I can't thank you enough for wanting to be back on. And Tony, I'm glad you were able to make it as well. I'm glad both of you were able to make it. Because it certainly is a lot more fun with more people. The more the merrier, as they say. And so with that, I will, let's see, I will bid you all a fond good evening, or good morning, Tony.
Good morning.
And play the ending credits. Quick
Cool.
promo, of course. Richard is CEO of Costa Rica's call center. You can find the link there in the description. And Tony Jetton Selimi, almost want to say salami, but I know that would be very, very wrong of me.
Unless you're thinking in your head, something else.
Is an incredible coach, and you can find his website link in the description as well. Go check him out and see how he might be able to help you become more than what you are, because we all need that round wheel to keep rolling in this on this road of life. So thank you, gentlemen, for being on. And
Thank you so much, Bill.
Feel free to come back anytime. All right. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all for tuning in. This has been a presentation of Bald Spots Productions. I'd like to thank my producer, my beloved mother, Eileen Hatch. I, of course, am your humble host. I'd like to thank my special guests, Richard Blank and Tony Jetton Selimi. Please, if you feel so led, support the show. We're on Patreon as Bald Spots Pro. And don't you dare miss YWL Online, airing Tuesdays and Saturdays. Of course, all of our shows are permanently housed on the internet for your listening enjoyment. Tune in next week for Tommy Schneermaker, and Zachary Hager. Oh, he's on the set for a second time, too. Please be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, follow, whatever you got to do to stay informed and kick that algorithm into gear so we can reach more people, because that, of course, is the important part. And thanks again for tuning in. Have yourselves a wonderful whenever. Good night.